Hi, good evening, everyone. So I don't know if you can, BitTorrent, but if you can, last night Fox played an episode of The Simpsons. And in the episode of The Simpsons, Bart's teacher is replaced because there's a movement that he's too conservative and the kids aren't progressing. And they bring in this new teacher whose name I've forgotten now, who basically introduces everybody to mobile devices, gets them all twittering and so on and so on. And it's a wonderful satire of the use of technology and mobile devices and so on in education. But it is a sign that these technologies are maturing. When the Simpsons when you get a placement in the Simpsons, that's a sure sign that your time has arrived. What I wanted to say, Ian asked me to talk about the timing of the launch of this centre, and I wanted to say a few things about that in terms of what I think is the right time, why this is the right time to launch this thing. I'm not terribly enthused about the post-bureaucratic term, and so I think it's a pretty awful term, but I think I kind of know where the people who created it are coming from. I think there's a great political historian called David Marquand, who I often rely upon for making sense of what's happened in Britain over the course of the last 100 years, and he's published a really seminal book about how Britain's democracy has evolved since 1918. And in it he argues basically the only way you can make sense of how things are moving is in democracy and in our governing and so on is to understand the theories of statecraft, understanding the actions of personality, and understanding fate and how it plays it and how unpredictable it is. And I think that it's a combination of those three things which I think is creating the conditions why this is a really good time to launch this think tank. I think we have first thing is I think that we've had a model of statecraft over the course of the last 12, maybe some people would argue maybe 20 odd years, which has been very centralizing in terms of management education. It's created an enormous amount of bureaucracy around the education system. It's been focused on whole school reform, particularly in the last 10 years. And we're now at a point, I think, where accident of history is beginning to actually begin the impact of the financial crisis, the public deficit, is leaving us at a time where we're actually beginning to really reflect on the effectiveness of some of that expenditure, the effectiveness of that policy, the extent to which the creation of, unprecedented creation of agencies and public bodies to support education has been effective and has delivered on that. My sense is that combined with some of the new figures emerging in British education, I'm unapologetically a supporter of what Michael Gove's got proposed for free schools and so on. I think it's important development, is creating the conditions where we are looking at, I think, at certain key new influences in terms of our future of education. So if I was to say what are the three things that are going to influence education over the course of the next 10 years, what are the things that are going to be key themes in terms of innovation in education? The first one I'd say is a real focus in on teachers rather than schools. There's a brilliant report published by Teach for America earlier this month on a longitudinal study of all their work over the last 15 years in US schools. And in it, what becomes really clear is the importance of the high quality of teaching and what are the key fundamentals of good teaching. And they argue in the report, and if you Google it through Atlantic Monthly, you'll get a really good account of it. You'll see in there that their critique of the emphasis on whole school planning and whole school improvement, whole school rebuilding and so on, and the importance of just getting great teachers. And also a very prosaic account of what actually constitutes a great teacher. And it challenges some of the existing stereotypes about charisma and so on. The quality of organisation of a teacher is really important. The link with the importance of reaching out to families, absolutely critical again. Brilliant account in Atlantic Monthly of schools in the same district of Washington, D.C. and some of the different impacts that teachers have had. Strongly urge you to read it. Second thing I think is the role of families. I think we now know for sure that there's overwhelming evidence that how by engaging in families and imaginative ways of engaging families and so on, you can have a really transformative impact on an individual's education. There's lots of good examples of where that's happening in schools already in the UK. We know about them. I think we're going to see an expansion of that as well. It's a policy, I think there's a long way to go with it. There's lots of really good examples, but I think we've a long way to go. But I think the evidence is really, really clear, both here and in the US, that engaging families in education will be important, and I would really strongly urge you to look at that. And the final area, obviously, is the use of technology and so on. The technologies that you've been talking about and so on are, of course, fast maturing. They're ubiquitous. They're going to play a more and more prominent role in our lives. Increasingly, it's obvious that they support a level of social interaction and so on that was unimaginable as recently as 5 years ago and so on. So some of the ideas that you've been talking about buzzwords around crowdsourcing and so on. I think there are real, genuine opportunities to experiment in that space between teachers and students, between teachers and parents and so on. And I think the first test of that will be over the course of the next few years when we look at new models for delivering schools, if there is to be an emphasis on more free, autonomous school development of schools and so on, how schools can reach out to parents, how they can develop new forms of engagement will be absolutely critical. So those are just three of the things that I'd be strongly urging you to look at as kind of key planks and priorities over the course of the next year as you get started. But I congratulate you getting going, and I think I'll leave it to you to do the final closure.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, mate. Thank you.